I saw the photo while waiting in line at the grocery store on an otherwise unremarkable afternoon. A tiny notification lit up on my screen. Jason Barrett just checked in at Seabreeze Resort with 5 others. I tapped it without thinking. Just muscle memory, something to pass the time. It took a second to load. And then I froze. Jason was seated at a long outdoor table, the ocean and soft golden light in the background. To his right sat his parents, both smiling wide, and to his left was Hannah. Hannah, his ex-girlfriend. I had to zoom in 3 times, double-check her profile, the angle of her head, the soft wave of her hair I remembered from old family albums. It was her. No question. She was laughing brightly, one hand resting lightly on Jason's arm like she'd done it her whole life. No one in the photo looked surprised to see her there. My mother-in-law was pouring her wine. My father-in-law was telling a joke that had the whole table in stitches. I stood frozen in the aisle, a can of tomatoes going cold in my hand. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from my brain refusing to make sense of what I was seeing. This trip was never mentioned to me. Jason had only said he was visiting his parents for lunch this weekend. No mention of a beach, no resort, and definitely no Hannah. I pulled up our recent messages, scrolled quickly through. There it was, a short detached line, "I'll be out Friday. Don't forget to close the office window if it rains." No invitation, no explanation. I opened Instagram, checked his sister's page. Her story was still up, a video of them clinking glasses under soft string lights, captioned, "The Barretts are back like old times." I wasn't in it, but Hannah was, front and center, like she'd never left. I came home with 2 bags of groceries and a head full of static. I put the bags down, slipped off my shoes, and sat on the living room floor, like if I stayed still long enough time might stop altogether. Jason had told me once a few months ago when I skipped a family dinner because I was too exhausted, "You don't like gatherings, right?" I hadn't answered. I thought he understood me. Now I realize they never needed a reason to leave me out, just an excuse that sounded polite. They said I wasn't invited because I don't like gatherings, but she's been part of the family longer than I have. That line played in my head like a splinter, sharp and undeniable. I wasn't uninvited because I didn't belong. I was never invited because they never truly saw me as one of them, because I wasn't Hannah the ex they never truly let go. I didn't scream. I didn't text. I didn't call. I opened my laptop, pulled up a flight search, and booked the earliest ticket to that coastal town. No luggage, no warning. I'm not going to start a scene. I'm not there to fight. I just want to sit down at that picture-perfect dinner table, look every single person in the eye, and ask one simple question: who am I to you? I've never been good with words. I'm not the type who wins people over with funny stories, well-timed greetings, or homemade pies brought to every gathering. People usually describe me as reserved if they're being kind. If not, then it's cold. I know that. I've always known. From the first time I stepped into Jason's family home, I felt like a guest, like someone filling a missing chair in a photo I was never meant to be part of. His mother smiled, but her eyes drifted past me as if she were waiting for another face to appear, a more familiar one. And then in the very next story, she mentioned her Hannah. Her voice softened with warmth, like she was saying the name of a distant relative who never really left. I heard Hannah's name so often, I sometimes felt like I had arrived after the main character had already left the stage. Hannah made the best peach cobbler, his mother would say. Hannah sang beautifully. She made your father tear up on that one camping trip. Hannah was always so friendly. She knew how to talk to people, and then she'd turn to me with a half smile. "You probably just need some time to adjust." I didn't say anything. I never did. I knew Hannah still kept in touch with his family. It was never a secret. She sent cards for holidays. She called to say Merry Christmas to Mom and Dad. Sometimes she'd even stop by if she happened to be in town. Jason said it wasn't a big deal, that they were just old friends now, and I shouldn't overthink it. "You're too sensitive," he'd often say. It sounded gentle, but inside me it landed like a weight. The truth is, I tried very hard to fit in. I bought birthday gifts for every family member, even though none of them remembered mine. I made dinner for the whole family. The first time I invited them over roasted chicken, I spent a week practicing. But no one ate much, and his mom just smiled and said, "It's a bit dry. Must be your oven." Jason said nothing. He passed me a piece of lettuce and continued talking with his sister about their summer travel plans I wasn't consulted on. One time I asked him, "Why do I always feel like a stranger in this life I'm supposed to be part of?" He held my hand and sighed, "You're overthinking again. My family's just its own kind of dynamic. You don't have to force yourself." But the irony is, by not forcing anything, I just kept fading. Like I was being asked to shrink, to soften, to stay small enough not to take up space. I know Jason loves me in his own way. But love without protection, without a clear choice, without the courage to stand by someone in a quiet room where no one speaks up for them, is that really enough? He's never introduced me as an essential part of his life. I'm Claire, Jason's wife, not Claire, the person who matters to me. I'm present, but never truly named in the stories that define him. And Hannah, she's different. She's been part of his family longer than I've even known his name. She's warm, easygoing, knows how to win people over, how to laugh at the right moment, how to excuse herself just before things get awkward. I'm not like that. I'm just me, introspective, quiet, someone who often feels lonely, even when seated at a full table. I used to think that with enough time they'd come to understand me. That silence doesn't mean indifference, that I love too, I try, I care, I just don't know how to show it the way they expect. But the longer I waited, the clearer it became some roles in a family are already cast. And I was never in the script, I'm the legal wife. But Hannah is the one they still call part of the family. And me, I'm just someone walking alongside, quietly, slowly disappearing. I found the group chat by accident one quiet evening when Jason left his laptop open on the kitchen counter and went upstairs to take a call. The screen hadn't gone to sleep yet. A notification popped up in the top corner, Family Trip 2025, itinerary draft updated. I'm not the kind of wife who snoops through her husband's messages. I used to be proud of that. But sometimes things appear in front of you that aren't meant to be ignored. I only glanced for a moment, but it was enough to see the members in the group, his parents, his sister, 2 cousins from Denver, and Jason. I wasn't in it. I opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat down like my body had been drained of all strength. When Jason came back down, I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, "Where are you going next weekend?" Jason paused for a split second, then replied casually, "I told you, heading to my parents for lunch." "Just lunch?" I asked again, this time looking directly at him. He scratched his head like he was carefully choosing words. "Well, turns out everyone's doing a quick beach trip. Just a little getaway to start the year. They're calling it a family trip, but no one's really bringing spouses. It's nothing big. A little trip. No spouses." I smiled thinly. Then why did I see a group chat called Family Trip 2025? His face stretched into an uneasy smile. "You looked at my laptop?" "No. It was open. I just saw the notification." Jason went quiet for a beat, then repeated, "I thought you didn't like the beach. You said you hate sand sticking to your feet." I looked down at my feet, bare, cold, and clean, then looked back at him. "Hating sand doesn't mean I don't want to be invited." He didn't answer. Just let out a soft exhale and changed the subject. Asked what I wanted for dinner. As if what just happened was a minor misunderstanding not worth discussing. That night I barely ate, and he didn't even notice. 3 days later, I saw the photo. I opened Instagram like I always did in the morning, sipping coffee, mindlessly scrolling until I landed on Eliza's latest story. Jason's sister. It was a picture of a seaside dinner. String lights hung between palm trees, golden and soft. A long table glowed under candlelight filled with elegant food and laughter. Jason sat at the head of the table, leaning in to talk to the person next to him. That person was Hannah. She wore a simple white dress, hair loosely tied, a wine glass in hand. She was laughing, that effortless, intimate laugh of someone who knows the man beside her deeply. Who had once held his hand through college summers, stayed the night at his parents' house, had been part of the narrative long before I even came along. She wasn't just there. She was sitting right next to him, close enough their arms nearly touched. Eliza's caption read, "Feels like nothing's changed. Wa family vibes, sunset dinners." I set my phone down on the table. My hands were shaking. Not from jealousy. Not because of Hannah. But because of the truth settling in like ice, I wasn't forgotten. I was excluded. Jason hadn't just gone on a casual family weekend, he was vacationing at a luxury beach resort with his parents, siblings, and his ex-girlfriend, the one his family still called part of the family. And me, I was home. Watering plants, folding laundry, prepping work files, texting him, "Will you be home for dinner?" like I was a wife in the loop. Turns out I wasn't forgotten. I was replaced. I opened the story again, zoomed in, stopped at Jason's expression, just a slight tilt of his head toward Hannah, but enough to know that was a familiar gaze. One he used to give me, a long time ago. I turned off my phone, sat still for a moment. Then I booked a flight. No luggage, no message, no permission. I wasn't going there to cause a scene, not to fight, not to beg. I was going to show them I'm still here. I saw everything. And this time, I won't stay silent. I arrived at the resort at 6:17 p.m. No one knew I was coming. I didn't tell a soul. I simply booked a ticket, grabbed my purse, carried with me the silence that had gone on for far too long, and a quiet kind of anger, the kind that lies under the skin, not loud, not explosive, just enough to keep me from turning back. I didn't check in, didn't go to the room, didn't change my clothes. I walked straight toward the seaside restaurant where golden lights hung gently from trellises, and the clinking of glasses rang out like the background music of a perfectly curated family dinner. I stood behind the glass wall, half hidden behind a white frangipani pot, and before me unfolded a scene that looked like it had been rehearsed, along white-covered table candles, glowing laughter echoing. My mother-in-law was telling some story about those old summer days, her hand resting fondly on the arm of the woman seated beside her, Hannah. Hannah was beaming, her head tilted just enough to seem effortlessly graceful, one hand holding a wine glass, the other gently placed on Jason's elbow. My husband. No one noticed me. No one paid any attention to the woman in the long coat standing outside the door, hands empty, gaze steady. Until a waiter approached, head tilted, politely, "Madam, are you with the Barrett party?" The question was just loud enough for the table to turn. I locked eyes with Jason, and in that moment, one I'll never forget, it was as if someone had poured a bucket of ice water over that elegant dinner. Jason choked on his smile. Hannah blinked, her wine glass suspended mid-air. My mother-in-law set her spoon down as if suddenly remembering she had left a soup unattended. I smiled. Softly. Very softly. "Yes," I replied. "I'm his wife." The waiter hesitated, then nodded respectfully and gestured toward the table. I didn't need him to guide me. I had already seen the empty chair beside Jason, half claimed by Hannah's posture. I walked up, pulled out the chair, set my purse down. Silence. Hannah straightened her hand, retreating from Jason like she'd touched an electric wire. Jason stammered, "Claire, when did you get here? Just in time?" I said, not taking my eyes off his mother. "I think I came in around the part when Hannah was telling her story about that one summer. Sounds familiar." My mother-in-law sipped her wine, said nothing. I turned to Hannah. "First time meeting, isn't it? Though I'm sure you've heard plenty about me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. A flush crept from her neck to her ears. Not from the wine. Jason told me, I continued slowly, that no one brought spouses on this trip. I glanced around the table. I guess that rule only applies to the present. No one spoke. I heard the clink of cutlery hitting a plate. "I used to think I was part of this family," I said, pouring myself some water. "Until I saw a group chat I wasn't in. Until I saw a photo of him next to you, and his mother's arm around you, like no one ever took your place." I looked at Mrs. Barrett. "I remember when I made roasted chicken for you once, and you said it was a bit dry. But tonight you seem quite happy with Hannah's salad. Must be more to your taste." She looked at me the first time without that poised, composed expression. "Claire, this is a misunderstanding." "No." I interrupted, still smiling. "There's no misunderstanding here. Some people just know exactly who they want at their table, and who they don't." I turned to Jason, my voice low but steady. "You don't need to explain. Your silence these past few days has explained everything." Hannah set down her glass and dabbed at her lips with a napkin. I looked at her one last time. "You've played your role well. Smooth, charming, easy to like. You know, I used to think that if I were more like you, maybe things would have turned out differently. I paused. But tonight, I realized I don't want to be you. I just want to be respected. I stood quietly, sliding my chair back. No one stopped me. No one had the courage. I won't ruin dinner, I said gently. I just want to leave one thing behind. I looked around the table. Most couldn't hold my gaze. I don't actually blame anyone, I said, my voice even like a perfectly sewn line. I used to think that if I smiled more, tried harder, blended in better, maybe I'd be invited. I pressed my lips together, but maybe the truth is simpler. Maybe I'm just not someone they want in the picture. Jason stammered, Claire, this isn't what you think. Then what is it? I turned to him. You secretly bring your ex on a family vacation while leaving me at home because I don't like the beach. Jason fell silent. Hannah bowed her head clearly, wishing the floor would open and swallow her whole. But it didn't. Only my gaze held them, and the kind of silence no one could look straight into. I didn't sit back down. I didn't need to. I just stood there beneath those warm, expensive lights like a forgotten extra who had walked into a scene she was never cast in. I used to think, if I was patient enough, someone would see me. I began. If I cooked your favorite dishes, brought thoughtful gifts, smiled just enough, never argued, if I played the good wife just right, maybe one day I'd be treated like family. I drew in a quiet breath, but year 1 passed. Then year 2. No one asked what I liked at the holidays. No one included me in the group chats. I was only mentioned to stay home and watch the cat. Jason looked up, about to speak, but didn't. His mother avoided both me and Hannah. She was folding her napkin now, every crease mechanical, desperate. I drove hours for Christmas lunch only to be sat at the kids' table because I don't like loud crowds. I once woke early to bake a cake for your uncle's birthday, but before it could be served, Eliza brought out one from the family's favorite bakery. Everyone clapped. Mine sat in the kitchen untouched. I turned to Hannah. She looked down, hands clenched in her lap. I don't blame you. You make people comfortable, and clearly in this family, comfort is valued more than truth. I looked around once more, stopping at Jason. You said I didn't like the beach, I repeated. But did you ever ask me if I wanted to go? Did you ever sit down and say, I want you there because you're my wife? Or did you just assume and use that assumption to keep me out? Jason bit his lip. His eyes didn't leave the table. His fingers scratched at his thumb, his nervous tell. There was a time I said I left a New Year's party early because I felt out of place. People kept asking, what do you do again? Even though I'd already said it. On my way home, I got a message from your mom. Next time, don't leave halfway, it doesn't look good. I smiled, bitter but calm. No one asked why I left, just whether I made them look bad. Mrs. Barrett looked up, lips tight, but she didn't speak. Not now. Maybe she finally couldn't. And so I said, voice lowering, I have just one question for you all. I stepped forward, the room frozen. What does it take to be seen here? A shared past? Or a shared name? No one answered. No one dared. Jason lowered his head further. Hannah touched her glass, didn't drink. And Mrs. Barrett, once so practiced in polite condescension, said nothing at all. I looked around slow, as if memorizing every face. Eliza, I called. She flinched. That birthday photo at the bar. You know the difference between you and me? She didn't respond. No one ever forgot to invite you. I turned to Jason one last time. His eyes were a storm of shame and cowardice, still not one word. I nodded. I'm not asking to be loved like family. I just want to be acknowledged as a person. And then I turned, walking out of the restaurant. The lights behind me still glowed, but they no longer felt warm. Someone dropped a spoon. Hannah whispered something to Jason. And me, I didn't need to hear anymore. For the first time in a long time, I walked away and felt nothing lost. I returned home on a Tuesday afternoon. The sun was soft, the breeze gentle, but I carried no trace of anticipation in my heart. The familiar door was still there. The quiet house was still there. But I was no longer the woman who used to swallow every emotion just to preserve it all. Jason was already sitting at the dining table wearing the light blue shirt I'd picked for him last year. His eyes were red, maybe from lack of sleep, maybe from regret. But I didn't ask. I no longer felt responsible for comforting a sadness I had never been allowed to show. "Claire," he began. "I'm sorry, I really am." I nodded and sat down across from him. "I'm not here for an apology." He fell silent. I placed a slim folder on the table, the signed divorce papers. No anger, no dramatics, just a quiet ending the way I had existed in this marriage for far too long. "You said you loved me?" I said softly, "but that love never came with a choice." Jason looked up, but I didn't give him room to interrupt. "I waited for you to speak up for me just once. At dinner, on vacation, in family conversations. But you stayed quiet, not because you didn't know what was happening, but because you didn't want to trade your comfort for my pain." I paused, voice steady. I can't keep loving someone who chooses avoidance when I need to be seen. Jason lowered his head. For the first time, he didn't try to defend himself. "I don't hate you," I said, "but I can't stay. Not for the title, not for habit, not for the hope that one day someone might finally see me." I stood. The kitchen was silent, as if it too were listening. "Divorce isn't failure," I said. "Failure is when I shrink myself a little more each day just to fit into a life where there's no space for me." Jason nodded faintly. I saw the tears in his eyes, but I felt nothing. Perhaps because I had already cried enough in waiting rooms and forgotten celebrations in every quiet night, hoping for a question that never came. I stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back one last time. "I hope one day you'll learn to choose a partner with your heart, not your history. For their presence, not just their familiarity. There were no hugs, no goodbyes. But one thing was certain, I was no longer the woman excluded from the family vacation. I was the woman who stepped out of a life that no longer made room for her. And that was a beginning, not an end." I left the old house with nothing but a small suitcase and myself finally chosen. Not by anyone else, but by me. And you, if you were me, would you have made the same choice?